Hello there and welcome. In the previous episode we started working on our questing system and we created our first NPC. Now it has only some basic functionality, but in this episode we're going to add more things so we can actually start a quest, we can customize the quest, and we can also provide the dialogues that we want the quest to have. So there will be a lot of coding involved in this episode. So for people that do want to have the entire script, I'm going to provide the NPC script in the description. This is the script that is going to contain most of the code, but of course I still recommend to follow along with the tutorial because we're going to do things inside other scripts as well and inside the inspector. So if you don't want to get errors, it's better to just follow along and type the code with me. At the moment we have this one method inside the NPC script, and it's a pretty hard-coded code that just tells the player hello there, and then the player can choose to say bye and close the entire dialogue. Of course, that's not something that we would usually do in the game because we do want to customize the quest. We want to be able to add different options and different requirements. So we're going to delete all of this and add some new code. Now, before we start working on this method, I want to add some functionality to this NPC, and it's basically to allow it to look at the player. So for example, if we approach the NPC from the back and we start the conversation, we want the NPC to rotate and look at our player. Otherwise, we're going to talk to its back and then it's not going to feel realistic. So we're going to create a method. So we simply get the transform of our player, and then we calculate the direction the NPC should look at, and then we make it look at this direction. And in order for the other values not to change, because we only want the NPC to rotate on the y-axis, we're going to reset the x and the z, and we're going to provide with the actual y rotation. So it will only rotate on the y rotation, and it's not going to move up or down, and it will look natural. And then we're going to take this method and we're going to call it when we start the conversation. And now when we run the game and we approach the NPC from the back and we start the conversation, it basically rotates to our direction. Now inside the NPC script, we're going to remove all the code except this is talking with player boolean and this look at player. Let's also remove this. Now we want to have references to the different buttons. So we have this dialog system over here, and we basically have two different buttons. We have this option 1 and option 2. So we want a reference to these buttons. We want a reference to the dialogue. But instead of getting these references every time, we're going to do it in the start method, and then we're going to have them locally inside this script. So let's create a reference for all of these components. And then we're going to create the start method, and inside we're going to get a reference to all of these components only one time. And now the code will be much cleaner because we don't have to do this each time we want to have a reference to the button. We're simply going to use these references. Next, we're going to create a new class that will be the quest class. So we create a new script and name it quest. And we don't need it to inherit from mono behavior because it's not going to do anything like that. It's just going to be a class that contains information. So it will have a bunch of bools, and these will be just to indicate the different states of this quest, if the quest is accepted, declined, completed, if it has no requirements, and it will also contain another class that will store additional information about this quest. So this quest info will actually be a scriptable object, and I'm going to create it with you together. So if you don't know anything about scriptable objects, it's basically just another way to store data. And the difference is that you don't need to instantiate these classes inside the code. You can simply create them and then save them as an asset inside your folder. So it's very useful when we have a big amount of data. For example, inside the quest, we're going to have a lot of different dialogues. So we do want to create some kind of scriptable object that we're going to provide for each quest. And if you want to learn a bit more about scriptable objects, you can just do that on your own. This is not going to be a tutorial about scriptable objects, but you're going to see how we use it inside the game, and there's nothing too complicated about it. Next, we also want to make this class serializable. So at the top, system serializable. And this will allow us to see information about this class inside the inspector. Now, until we're going to create this scriptable object, it's going to give us an error. So let's just comment this out for a second and save this class. Now inside the NPC, we're going to create a bunch of new properties. So over here, so we have a list of quests because maybe some NPCs will have more than one quest. Then we have a reference to the current active quest and the active quest index. Then we also have a boolean that tells us if it's the first time we're interacting with the player, because if it's the first time, we know to start looping this list. And we also want to know where exactly we are standing inside the list of different dialogues. Now we're going to move inside the start conversation, and we want to check if it's the first time we're talking with the NPC, because if it's the first time, we want to set the first quest to be the active quest. So if it's the first time we interact with the NPC, we're going to set it to be false, and we're going to make the current active quest the first quest, because the active quest index will be 0 at the beginning. And then we're also going to actually start the initial dialogue. So this is a method we want to create. And we're going to reset the current dialogue, because when we're going to start a new quest, we need to reset this. So over here, now we're going to add the code inside this method. So inside this start initial dialog, we're going to open the actual dialog UI, and then we want to set the text of the first dialog. So to do this, we're going to go inside our current active quest, and inside we will go into the info, and the info is going to be this scriptable object over here. So there will be a lot of information inside this quest info. Then inside, we're going to look for something named initial dialog, and this will be a list of all the dialogues inside this quest. And we're going to get the current dialog that will be 0 at the beginning. Then we're going to set the first button text to be next. So this first button will be saying next, and the player will be able to just click on it and continue to the next dialogue. Then we also want to remove all click listeners, because if we already set a different click listener, then this button will have a different functionality. So we just want to make sure that we actually add a fresh new on-click listener and there are no other listeners that we may have set before. Then we create this onClick listener. We increase the current dialog by 1. And then we check if the dialog is actually done or if we have more dialogues inside this list. So we're going to generate this method. And also we want to set the option button 2 to be false because right now we don't want to see this button over here. We only want to see this first button. Now, of course, in order for this to work, we need to create this QuestInfo, this scriptable object, and then we're going to be able to get the information inside. So we're going to go to the quest, we're going to uncomment this, and then it's going to give us an error, but we're going to generate this class in a new file. Then we can simply click on this and it will take us into the class. And now just to be sure, let's copy all the namespaces, although we don't need most of them. Now, in order to make this into a scriptable object, we need to do two things. First of all, we need to add scriptable object over here, and we also need to add this at the top. So with this, we're simply going to create this type of asset, because I told you that scriptable objects are something that we actually save inside our assets folder. So this will allow us to create this kind of scriptable object. Now, to see how we can actually create a scriptable object, we are going to save this and we will go to the NPC for a second and just comment this out. Otherwise, it's not going to compile, and save. And now over here, we can right click, create, and at the top, we're going to see a new option, scriptable objects, and we have this QuestInfo. So it actually created an asset inside our folder, and this is the scriptable object that we're going to have. So we can name it whatever we want, and because it's going to be the QuestInfo of the first quest, and it will go inside this first NPC, let's name it something like first NPC Quest 1. So now let's save this, let's go back, and we can uncomment this, and then go back into the QuestInfo. So we're going to add a bunch of different things inside this QuestInfo, because there will be a lot of different data that we need to have for our dialogue system. And this will be very basic, but it will still look like a lot. And in other bigger games, there will be even more. So don't get scared. I'm going to explain to you what every one of them does. And when you understand this, it's actually pretty simple. So I will also provide you with this class, this QuestInfo, because it's a lot to type down. And I know as developers, we are lazy. So don't worry about this. So we have a list of strings that will be the initial dialogue. So because we don't want to show the entire dialogue in one time, we want to divide it into several chunks. Then we're going to save all of these chunks inside this list. Then we have different options. For example, this will be the option to accept the quest. For example, yes, I want to help you. And then we're going to have the accept answer that will be what the NPC tells us when we accept the quest. Then we're going to have the decline option. So for example, no, I don't want to help you. And then the decline answer. So the NPC will tell us, oh, think about it again. Then we are going to have a bunch of other things. So if we come back to the NPC after we declined, and if we came back to the NPC while the quest is still in progress, then he's going to tell us you still need a few more items. And when we come back and the quest is completed, so all of these things are different dialogues or different options that are going to be available on the UI. Then we have different rewards. Of course, we can add more things to this, and the requirements. So we're going to have several requirements. And for example, this will be the first requirement, and then how many of this thing. So for example, maybe we have a requirement of stones, so this will be stone and this will be 5. So 5 stones and then sticks, 2 sticks. So we can add more of these, and of course later we're going to have requirements that are not only items but also go there and talk to this person, so some kinds of checkpoints. But for now we're going to have item requirements. Now if we save this and we go inside the inspector and we click on the scriptable object, we can see that we have all of these options over here. And as I told you, it's basically some kind of container for data, and now we can add all of this data and we don't need to do it from within the code. So this will be stored inside our project, and we simply take this and we drag it into our quest. So we have the NPC over here, and then we have the quests. So we will simply create one quest and press enter. And now we have this first element that will be the first quest. And over here, we need to add this QuestInfo, this scriptable object. So we can simply take this and drag it inside this slot. So now this is connected. And instead of having a bunch of information over here that will be saved inside the script and inside this quest, we have it over here inside this asset. So of course we need to fill all of this up, but as you can see, these little slots are very narrow and it will be hard to actually add some text over here. So we're going to enter inside the QuestInfo and we're going to add something over here at the top of each one of these strings. And this will basically make this area a bit bigger, so it will be easier to see the text. And we are going to copy this and paste it on top of each of these strings. So over here we don't need this because the reward will be just one word. But here we're going to have a bunch of words or maybe even paragraphs. So let's save this. And now we can see that it got much bigger and it's easier to add text over here. So now you're going to have to create your own quest, think about your own idea, the different dialogues. I already prepared something, and you're going to see this dialogue when we actually play the game. And of course, these are the different accept options and accept answers, but over here we have the initial dialogue. So here we need to add all the dialogue that precedes the actual quest. So I'm going to have about 5 different dialogues. So I've added some initial dialogue and I have the different answers and buttons, and I also add the rewards and requirements. Of course, we still don't have coins, but it's something that is very common. So I'm going to show you how we can add this. And then we have the rewards. Again, these will not be the final rewards, but it's just so we can see that everything is working. So if you don't have a second requirement, just leave it empty and make it 0. But now all of this is saved over here and we don't need to do anything else. So inside the NPC, if we get the current active quest and we access the info, we access the initial dialogue, and then the first element will be this first dialogue. So we basically display the first dialogue, and then we're going to click on next, and it's going to display the second element, and then it's going to display the third element. And then each time we press on next, we want to check if it's the end of the dialogue, because some dialogues will be with 10 elements, other dialogues will be with only 2 elements. So we need to know if it's the end of the dialogue. So to do this, we're going to create this check if dialog is done method, and inside we're going to check if the dialog is done. If it's done, then we're going to display these first options. Sure, I want to help you, I can use some money, or I'm sorry, but I can kill them as well. But if it's not the end of the dialog, then we're simply going to increase the current dialog and display the next dialog. And then we're going to do it all over again. Now this method will be pretty long, so I'm just going to copy it from what I have and I'm going to paste it. I don't want to type everything. So all we do is check if the current dialog, the one that we displayed, is the final dialog, because we just check the count and then we subtract 1 and it means that it's the last element. Then we want to set this initial dialog completed to be true. We want to set the final dialog because it will still require us to put the last one, right? The one that it's actually asking the player for help. And then we're going to have the accept option. So we're going to set the text of the first button to be the accept option. And then we're going to set the option 2 button to be the text of the decline button. Of course, we need to make it true because it wasn't visible before, but then we're going to set the text of the second button to be the decline option. So we basically put this accept option text over here and this decline option over here. So you see that everything is generic and you can create your own quests. Nothing is hard-coded. We don't have any text inside of the code. All of the text is over here, so you can create as many quests as you want. And if it's not the last dialogue, then we're simply going to do the same thing we did before. We are going to set the next dialogue. We're going to have this next button, and we're going to check it again if we press on this next. So when we click on this, it will do this all over again. It will check again. And if it's not the end, it will do this again. And it will keep doing this until it's actually at the end of the initial dialogue. And then it's going to run all of this. So after it got to this part and it set these onClick listeners, we want to create both of these methods. So if we click on this accept button, it's going to accept the quest. And if we press on this second button, the decline option, it's going to decline the quest. So let's create both of these methods. And if we go inside, for now, let's just see that everything is working because we added a lot of code. So print quest declined, quest accepted, and let's see if everything is working. Of course, let's close this. Hey, I didn't expect to meet anyone out here. I'm Elena. I live in the nearby village. I'm supposed to help my father get rabbit hides. He is a famous leather worker in our village. He will never say this, but I know he wanted to have a son. One that could help him with the family business and take over it someday. Sometimes I just feel like a disappointment. I came here to prove that I can help. But I can't kill these rabbits. They're so fluffy and cute. I'm useless. Wait, maybe you can help me. Don't worry, I will pay you. Sure, I will help you. I can use some money. Or, I'm sorry, but I can't kill them as well. So for now, nothing will actually happen. It will just print if we accepted the quest or declined. But after this, we need to add the code to make this quest accepted. And then we can actually go and start killing rabbits and get their hides. So there will be a lot of things involved in killing the rabbits and getting things to drop from these rabbits. But for now, we do want to finish working on this dialogue system, and that's why I created these requirements over here. We can see the stick, so we need 3 sticks. So just for testing, we need to pick up 3 sticks, And when these 3 sticks are picked up and they're inside our inventory, we can actually complete this quest. Later, we're going to create hides and we're going to place them on the rabbits. So when we kill the rabbits, they're going to drop some hides and we need to collect them. And then we're going to set the hides over here. But you can see that everything is working. It simply goes through all of these dialogues. And when it reaches the final element, it gives us 2 options. And then we can choose one of them. And we still did not add the code. But if we choose this one, then she's going to tell us, oh, that's awesome. If you can bring me 7 hides, it will be more than enough. And if we decline, she will tell us, oh, well, it was worth a try. If you change your mind, please come back. So then, of course, we can decline the quest, go away and come back later. And then she will ask us, so did you change your mind? And then we can accept the quest again. And if we accept, it will simply run this code. If we decline, it will simply run this code. And then we can return back when we want to. Of course, we are also going to add more than one quest. So when we are done with this quest, we're going to be able to start a new quest, right? Because we only have one quest at the moment, but later we can add more quests. Next, we want to create both of these methods. We want to do something when we accept the quest and when we decline it. So again, I'm just going to copy all the code. So inside the accept quest, we take the current active quest and we mark it as accepted. And then if for any reason we declined it before, we want to make it declined false, so it's no longer declined. Then we want to check if this quest even has requirements, because some quests will be just simple quests that the NPC is asking something and then you have 2 options or more to answer, and that's the entire quest. You don't need to bring anything, you don't need to do anything. So we also want to have this option. So we want to check if this quest even has requirements. If it doesn't have requirements, then we're going to get the reward right away. So we're going to set this comeback completed text into the text. We're going to set this option on the button take reward, and then we're going to run this method receive reward and complete quest. But if it has requirements, then we want to set this accept answer on the text, and we're going to close the entire dialog, and then we're going to also close the entire UI. So we're simply setting this accept answer, which is this accept answer. Now, why this is it's not contained, current active quest, has no requirements. Maybe it has a different name. Let's see. Yeah. And then we also have this declined quest. So current active quest will become declined. And we set the decline answer. So this one. And we're going to close if we press on the button, and when we press on the button, it will also close the UI, and that's it. So we can always come back and start the conversation again, but for now, we simply declined the quest. And the important part is that this quest will be marked as declined, and we're going to see it over here, quest, and it will just be declined. And then we can use this declined to check if the quest is declined, then do something. But that's all for this declined quest. So now that we have all of this, let's also create this method over here that we're going to deal with later. And next we want to take care of all the other options. So for now we have the interaction for the first time and interaction after the first time. So inside of this else block, we have different options, because if we decline the quest and came back, it should go over here. If the quest is still in progress, it should go over here. And if the quest is completed, it should also go over here. So again, I'm not going to type everything. Let's just copy this part. So if we return to the NPC and we start talking with him after we decline the quest. So if we decline the quest, it means that the current quest will be marked as declined. So we simply check this. Because over here, when we talk with the NPC, it will start a conversation. And it will obviously not be the first time we talk with him. So it will go over here to this else block. And then it will check and it will see that this quest is marked as declined. So it will run this code. And then it will open the UI. It will set this comeback after decline text, which is this one. Comeback after decline. So did you change your mind? And then we're going to have these options again, accept option and decline option. So these will be the same options. Now, of course, you can add more options over here. You can have decline option after declining or accept option the second time after declining. So maybe when you return, then you're going to have a different text. But we're going to keep it simple. And of course, if you understand how all of this works, you can add more options and do whatever you want. So we basically just set this block of code, and this block of code is very similar to this block of code. And later we're going to merge both of them because we don't want this boilerplate code. Next, we want to deal with the scenario that we do accept the quest, but we still did not complete the requirements or did not complete all the requirements. So it will go inside this else and it's going to be this block of code. So if we return, well, the quest is still in progress. So we just check if the quest is accepted, but it's still not completed. And then we're going to check if all the requirements are completed. For now, we are going to disable this because we still don't want to deal with this method. So I'm just going to comment this out. And instead, I'm going to make this if true. And this is just for testing because we want to see that this code is working without actually dealing with this method. We also want to comment this out for now. And now if we come back and the quest is not completed, if the requirements are completed, we're going to take the reward and we're going to set this comeback completed text. And then when we click on take reward, we're going to run this receive reward and complete quest. If we still did not complete all the requirements, then it's going to run this code. So it's going to open the UI, but it's going to set this comeback in progress. So comeback in progress is this. It is still not enough. Make sure to check in the tall grass as well. And then if it's not enough, we click on close and we'll simply close the UI, and we need to keep hunting for rabbits or whatever, gathering the things that we need for this quest. Before we test all of this, we also want to add the other option. So if the quest is actually completed, so if the current quest is completed, and it means that we already took the reward, but we still come back to the same NPC. And what it will do, it will simply run these final words. So these are the final words that the NPC will tell us. For example, thank you for your help. And then it doesn't matter how many times we're going to return to this NPC, he will always say thank you for your help. Now, this is only relevant if there is no other quest available later. Because if there is another quest available, these final words are not going to even be played, and we're going to start the next quest. And then we also have this block of code, and this is a block of code that is relevant for a scenario that we finished the previous quest, but we still have a new quest. And it means that we did not complete the initial dialogue. So we're going to start the quest initial dialogue, and we already have this method over here. So we don't need to create another one, but it's going to have another active quest, because over here inside the receive reward and complete quest, we are going to set a new current active quest. We're simply going to increase the active quest index by 1. So it's going to find the next quest, if there is another quest, because some NPCs will have one quest and other NPCs will have multiple quests. And now that we have all of this, let's go to this method. So it's going to crash the game. So instead of crashing, let's just print received reward. And remember that right now we're still not checking if the requirements are met, right? It's always true, so it will always assume that we already completed the quest. So now let's find the NPC, let's start a conversation, and we have this initial dialogue. Then if, for example, we decline, then she will say, oh well, it was worth a try. If you change your mind, please come back. And then we close and we continue. Then maybe we do have time for this quest, we come back, and now she tells us, so did you change your mind? And again, we can accept or decline. We can keep declining and we'll just loop through this code. But if we accept the quest, she will say, that's awesome. If you can bring 7 rabbit hides, it will be more than enough. And now the quest started and we can just go and gather the things. But because we set it to be true inside the code, if we return to the NPC, she will think that we actually got all the requirements. So if we talk to her, those poor things, as promised, here is your reward. So now we take the reward and you can see at the console, received reward. And if, for example, we're going to set it to be false, then she is going to think that it's still not enough. So if we go over here and we accept the quest, and then we go and we return, it is still not enough. Make sure to check in the tall grass as well. Okay? So now let's uncomment this. Our quest requirements completed. Let's create this method. And we can find it over here. So it's a pretty long method as well, but it's not complicated. We only have these errors because of the spelling. So let's go inside the info, the quest info, and let's take this requirement amount and then second requirement. So all we do inside is check if all the requirements that are needed, if we have them inside our inventory. So first of all, we get the first required item and the first required item amount, and we store them inside. Then we have this counter that is set on 0. And then we loop over all the items that we have inside our inventory. And if this item is inside our inventory, then we're going to increase this counter by 1. Because if, for example, it requires 5 sticks, then we need to find 5 sticks inside our inventory. Then we're going to do the same thing, but with the second required item. And then when we are done with the second item as well, we're going to check if the first counter is bigger or equals the first required amount, and the second item counter is also bigger and equals the second required amount, it means that we have more than the items that we need. And also here we have more than the items that we need, than the amount of items that is required. So we simply return true. And if both of them or one of them is not true, it's going to return false. So this entire method returns a boolean and it's getting returned over here. And this way we can know if all the requirements are completed. Now, if you want to have more items, all you need to do is just copy this code and maybe add a third item, fourth item. But remember, it's not the amount of items, it's just the different kind of items. For now, all the requirements are things that we need to have inside the inventory. But later in the next episode, we're going to add requirements that are not items, but rather things that we need to do, places that we need to go. So these will be checkpoints that we're going to store inside some kind of singleton. In this way, we simply check if this checkpoint is completed, and we're going to return true. So it's going to be another condition, but these will be item conditions, and we can also add checkpoint conditions or whatever you want to call them. Next, we want to create this receive reward and complete quest. So over here, we're going to receive all the rewards for the quest, and we're going to basically mark the quest as completed and increase the quest index so it can run the next quest. So if the NPC has more than one quest, it will simply start the second quest. And then when we complete the second quest, it will start the third quest. So we're going to do it over here. So first thing, we mark this quest as completed, and then we're going to get the coin reward. For now, we don't have any coins inside our game. We only have items, but later we're going to have coins. But we do want to see that it works, so we're just going to print you received, coins received, gold coins. And we get these rewards by simply accessing the current active quest info, which is the scriptable object, and we access the coin reward, so we can find this over here, and we set it to be 25 coins. Now, of course, you don't have to do it. You don't have to give him coins. You can put it at 0. Maybe you can have XP over here, so it will work the same way. Although this is not an RPG game, so we don't have XP, it's just a survival game, but you can do it with XP as well. Now we simply check if we actually have rewards. So if we do have items as rewards, it means that the reward item is not empty. It means that over here, we do have something and it's not just empty. Then we simply add this item, the reward item, into the inventory. And it's very simple because we already have this method inside the inventory system. And we do the same thing with the second reward. And if you have more rewards, you can add them over here. Next, we increase the active quest index because we want to complete this quest and start the second quest. Next, we check if we actually have another quest for this NPC. So if the active quest index is smaller than the quest count, then it means that there is another quest. So we're simply going to get the other quest from this list and we're going to make it the current active quest. We're going to reset the current dialogue. We're going to close the UI, and then the player should start a new conversation. If there are no more quests, we're simply going to close the UI. And we're going to print this, although we don't need to do it. Now, I already tested this out. So all I did was go to the first NPC. I added another quest over here. And then inside the second quest, I simply created a new scriptable object. I gave it some dialogues, some options, some rewards, and it is working. I don't want to waste your time and make this episode longer than it should. It's already long, so you should trust me that it's actually working. All you need to do is create a new scriptable object with information about the second quest. You need to go over here, add a new quest, and drag this second scriptable object inside this element. But we are not going to have two quests, we're only going to have one quest. And I assume that most of your NPCs will only have one quest anyway. But it will work. So you can also add 10 quests, but it is working. So just trust me. For now, we're only going to have one quest. Now, before we actually test this and see that everything is working, we need to also submit the items, because if she asks us for rabbit hides, then we need to give her the rabbit hides. We don't want to keep them inside our inventory, right? Usually when an NPC asks for something, we need to gather it and then give it to them. So we are going to do it over here inside this part. So we comment this out before. So here we're simply going to submit these items that we gathered. So let's create this method. And again, we need to fix the typos. So first requirement amount. And over here, it's very simple. Again, we get the required item and the required amount. And then if there is a required item, we simply remove it from our inventory. And we already have this method inside the inventory system. So it receives a name of an item to remove and also the amount to remove. So it's very easy. We simply put the amount over here and the item name over here. So if we submitted 7 rabbit hides, it will go into our inventory system and remove 7 rabbit hides. And we can also do it for the second item. And if we have more items, then you can add it over here. But we already have this method inside the inventory system that does it for us. So now if we run the game, everything should work. So we can go through this entire dialogue. Then we start the quest. And she says that we need 7 rabbit hides, but we know that for now that's not the case. We need 3 sticks. So if I don't have these 3 sticks in my inventory and I just come back, she will say it is still not enough. But if I pick up these 3 sticks, let's just pick up 2 sticks for now. And this will still not be enough. Of course, in the next episode, we're going to add some UI to see how many items we have for the quest. For example, we need 3 sticks, so we are going to see it on the UI. And now let's pick up the 3rd stick. So we have 3 sticks in our inventory. And if we approach her and talk to her after we have these 3 sticks, then she has this dialogue as promised. Here is your reward. Take reward. And now we can also see that we got some reward and we submitted the sticks. So the sticks are gone and we got these 2 stones as reward because this is what we set in the settings. Now, if we come back to her, we have these final words. I hope this will make my father proud. And it doesn't matter how many times we will come back, she will always say this. Now, if we had another quest, then the new quest would start right now and there would be the new initial dialogue and then it would just go on as long as we want. And you can see over here we have these 3 sticks as requirements and 2 stones as rewards. So everything is working and we added a lot of code in this episode. So in the next episode we're going to add a few more things to the questing system. First of all, we need to add some UI. We want to be able to see that we are actually on an active quest. So we're going to see some UI on top that tells us what are the objectives. And we also want to add the option to have requirements that are not just things that we need to pick up, but some kind of checkpoint that we need to do. We need to reach somewhere. We need to talk to someone. So we're going to be able to add it over here. And before we end this episode, if we go back into our NPC script, if we look closely, we have a lot of duplicated code. For example, over here we have this block, accept quest, decline quest, so all of this, right? And if we go over here, we have the same block of code. So this is called boilerplate code. It means that it's exactly the same code and there is no reason to have the same exact code. This is not a good practice in any coding language. So what we can do is just create a method out of this block of code. So this will be different, right? Because we are setting the comeback after decline over here, but all of this part that we set the buttons will be the exact same thing. So we can just cut this out and then we're going to call a method named something like set accept and decline options. Then we're going to generate this. And then we can go into this method and paste this code over here. Now, if we're going to find the same duplicate, where was it? Over here. So we're not going to touch all of this because this is not the same as before, but this part over here is the exact same thing. So we're going to simply delete this and we're going to call the method. So set accept and decline option. So now it made our code shorter, cleaner, and the most important thing about boilerplate code is that if we do want to change something in this code, we don't have to go over here and change it and then go over here. We can simply go to this one location and change it over here, and then it will be applied for both places because we're simply calling the same method. So you always want to avoid duplicate code. Now also inside these two methods, we have something similar. So if we go over here, we have this closing part, right? And then also when we accept the quest, we also need to close the UI. So we don't need this duplicate code, so we can do the same thing. So let's copy this. Close dialog UI or something like that. We're going to generate this method and we're going to paste this code. And now let's go over here. We're going to copy all of this, only this part because this is not the same. We're going to cut this and close dialog UI. So that's all for this episode. Right now, you can create your quests, you can have requirements, rewards, and the rest of the things that we need to do, we're going to do in the next episode. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're still not subscribed. Please leave a like, it will also help me a lot, and see you next time.